Hello everyone on YouTube, WHQL here. I decided I wanted to give you guys a heads up and kind of surprise you guys. I was talking about doing a new PC upgrade, because I was thinking about doing some kind of mod or upgrade to my computer. And I was looking at the decisions on what I should do. I was thinking maybe new case, computer case, or maybe water cooling my two 670 GTX for the wins, or maybe doing custom water cooling. And I was looking at the different options and thinking of the pros and cons of it. And in the end, I just decided to pick up another EVGA 670. And this is just the reference model. It's nothing special. It's just a stock one with, I think it's like 915 megahertz core. I'll throw a picture up in this video at the beginning. And yeah, I want to try out, some people call it Nvidia Tri-SLI or Nvidia 3-way SLI. I'll just call it 3-way SLI. I just wanted to benchmark it and show the performance and show you guys the performance. My motherboard allows for 3 video cards, but they're stacked up on top of each other. So yeah, the performance is really, really crazy, and you guys can see in all these different kind of benchmarks I'm going to show in this video. I got a really good deal on the it's a EVGA 670. I'll put the part number in the description, the model number of it. I think I got it for like $320, which is extremely cheap, because if you think about my EVGA 670 GTX for the win, which is the overclock model, that was more expensive. That was like $400 to $430, and this was only $320. So right now the 670 GTX is going down in price, and you can get pretty decent on there. I couldn't afford another EVGA 670 GTX for the win, to put in 3-way SLI. So since I got the cheaper model, with the small PCB where it's really small, I decided to overclock it from the stock 915 megahertz core clock all the way up to the EVGA 670 GTX for the win model, which is 1006 megahertz core clock. I also decided to bump up the memory clock to the 670 for the win speeds, so that's 100 megahertz more. And doing these different kinds of tests with the different games and comparing, in the description I'll put another link to a article where the new Nvidia Titan came out. And they're showing different benchmarks of it. The performance with the 3 EVGA 670 GTX for the wins is right up there with 3 680 GTX stock reference cards. And in 3D Mark 11 Extreme Test and some of the other tests, it's actually beating 3 stock EVGA 670 or 680 in 3-way SLI. So for the price to performance, it's not bad actually. I mean, compared to buying 3 680s, 3 670s is the way to go if you overclock them. Doing the different performance benchmarks and comparing scores with these different websites, I come to find out I did end up beating the Nvidia Titan, which just came out, which retails at $1,000 if you could find it. And I'm gonna talk about the Nvidia Titan a lot in this. If the Nvidia Titan is kind of expensive, and they're trying to say that two 670 or two 660 Ti's, two 660 GTX Ti's, a Ti version, are about the same as the Titan, and it's a lot cheaper option. So if you were to take two 670 GTX for the wins, that would technically beat the Titan in a lot of the benchmarks and games. It's just, because it's pretty much up there with two 680s in performance. With the 3 670 GTX, once you overclock the third card, because I save money, I didn't buy the for the win model. Once you overclock it to match the for the win speeds, the performance is right up there with 3 680 GTX reference cards, and it beats the 690 GTX, and the 690 is big money. Comparing some of the benchmarks, it's right up there. I think they have that Asus, I'm trying to think what it is. Not that, it might be the Asus Aries too, the one that has the dual HD 7970 graphics cards. It's water cooled, the crazy one. I think it's the Aries too. The performance is right up there with the 3 670 GTX for the wins. I kind of want to tell you guys the pros and cons of 3 670 GTX for the wins. My motherboard has it where the cards are stacked up on top of each other. So I don't know if you've seen in some of my other videos where it shows I had EVGA 680 backplates on two of my 670 for the one graphics cards. The problem is they're kind of like overheating because there's no air. It can't suck up any air. So playing Crysis 3 and demanding the first level where it's really, really demanding, my top card was actually hitting with the auto fan speed, was actually hitting 90 Celsius, which is insane. I mean, that's above where I'd want to run it. So I was trying to figure out what the problem was, and I seen that it was blocked. The back plate that I put on the second card itself was blocking the top card. So what I did is I took all the video cards out and I took the back plate off the second card, because I have the two EVGA 670 GTX for the Win models up on top, and then I have the stock small PCB reference EVGA 670 at the bottom. So they're stacked up on top of each other in three-way SLI, and the top card always gets the hottest. So that's something you got to keep in mind. It's always going to get the hottest. So after I took the second card's EVGA 680 backplate off and put them back in there, I left a little bit of a gap in there for air to breathe in there, and I put a 120 millimeter fan on there, and I noticed a 3 to 4 Celsius degree drop in temperatures. So instead of 90 C, it only went up to 86 or 87 C. And Crysis 3 is really, really demanding. It stresses the GPUs. This is kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to pick up the third EVGA 670, because I wanted to see how much of a performance increase I'll get with these different games that support three-way SLI. And that's something you got to bear in mind, is not a lot of these games will support three-way SLI, and you'll have problems where you actually get worse performance with 3 cards than you would 2, or you'll get it where you won't see any performance increase. I was playing Battlefield 3 because I figured that would be the game that would really stress it to the max. You figured the third card would make huge difference. But to me, it didn't really make that much difference. I think I only seen like a 10 to 15 frames per second extra, maybe 20 frames per second extra. It doesn't justify the cost of the third card. Really, the third card is only for people who are running 3 monitors, or if they're running huge resolutions like 2560 by 1600 or 2560 by 1440p. These huge giant resolutions. That's when you really need the GPU horsepower, and you really need, at least 2 to 3 graphics cards just so you can get playable frames per second. Like I like to have my games at least 60 frames per second average. And even Metro 2033, if you've seen some of my benchmarks, at the first level I was getting like 62 frames per second with 2 EVGA 670 GTX for the wins at 1920 by 1200 resolution with the highest settings. But when you go to the foggy areas, it would actually drop down to 40 frames per second average. And I'm one of those high-end first-person shooter guys who like that frames per second to be high. I can notice a difference when it drops below 60 frames per second. I can notice a difference. Even when it drops below 100 frames per second, I can notice a huge difference. But yeah, I like to keep it always at least 60 frames per second average and try not to have it drop. And that's what makes it really smooth for me. And yeah, really the third card only comes into play if you really want to I like to benchmark. I really started getting into benchmarking, and I kind of want to push my system to the max and see what kind of scores I can get in 3D Mark Vantage or 3D Mark 11 or the brand new 3D Mark that came out. So yeah, that's just something I want to tell you guys, keep in mind. Your motherboard has to support the three-way SLI, for you to support it, for it to work. It uses a triple SLI bridge. I'll show it like in a picture at the beginning of the video, where you connect 3 cards together. You probably figured this out, but the Corsair GS 800 watt power supply that I had in there didn't have enough connectors to power the 3 video cards, and technically it wouldn't have enough power. So I ripped out the brand new Corsair HX 1000 watt power supply out of my home theater PC and put it back into my main gaming PC, the half 932 PC. And now I have enough power to power everything, to power 3 cards. To power the three EVGA 670 GTX for the wins and tri-SLI or three-way SLI, you need at least six 6-pin PCI Express power connectors. And I would say probably, I mean, you might be able to do, I'd say at least 1,000 watt power supply. You know, you probably might be able to do a high quality 850 watt if you have the connectors, but I really wouldn't chance it, you know, because you might fry something. So 1,000 watt, if you have all the connectors for it, 1,000 watts great for like three HD 7970s and AMD Crossfire X or AMD Tri-Fire. Or if you want to run three 680 GTX and three-way SLI or tri-SLI, you can do that. Yeah, like I said, I didn't have the money to buy the third card, or I mean to buy the expensive third card, the EVGA 670 GTX for the win model, because that was more expensive. I think that was going for $400, and the stock reference one was only, you know, it was a lot cheaper. It was only like $320. Now for the clocks, because I wanted to, I talked about this earlier, but I wanted to match the same clock speed of the small PCB stock reference EVGA 670 GTX for the win. So here's the clock. So I'll have a picture in this video later on. I did clock it. The stock clock for the EVGA 670 GTX reference model with the small PCB, the default clock speed is 915 megahertz. The memory is 1502 megahertz, so 1502 megahertz, and the boost clock is only 980 megahertz. Now, I decided to overclock it to match my other cards, the EVGA 670 GTX for the wins. So when I overclocked it, the GPU core clock went all the way up to 1006 megahertz. That's the same as a stock reference 680 GTX. The memory speed was 1552 megahertz, and the boost clock was 1071 megahertz. So it boosted all the way up. Really, the number one thing you really have to worry about when you're running a setup like this with the three cards is the heat. The heat is really, really hot. Like, if I was running two-way SLI with two cards, to two EVGA 670 GTX for the wins, the speed would literally get all the way up to, the temperature would get all the way up to probably 84, 85 Celsius, but when I run the two cards, or the three cards, it ends up running like 87, 82, 82. So the bottom card runs the coolest, and the top card runs the hottest, because the heat travels upward. Yeah, the performance is really insane. Not a lot of games work for the three-way SLIs. Some of them do. The number one games, these are the games that I definitely, if you want to benchmark and you want to try it out, these are the games that it's definitely going to work, is Far Cry 3, because I did see a high GPU usage. Crysis 3 definitely work. Metro 2033, and what was it, Hitman Absolution. Those games definitely work. I turned off, believe it or not, I tried Dirt 3 and Dirt 2. If you turn off some of these settings, if you turn off VSync and everything, that works too. Yeah, so the performance is really, really insane. Like I said, you only want this kind of setup if you have a high resolution monitor, or you're running three monitors, three displays. Then you'll definitely know, then it's definitely worth it in the long run. But me, I just like to benchmark, so I wanted to see how it ran. I was thinking of different options when I was going to upgrade. I was also thinking about maybe picking up a 2560 by 1440 1440p resolution monitor, like maybe a 27-inch. But the prices are just too insane on those monitors. I'm still seeing the prices go up to like $800 to $1,100, when technically those monitors only should be about $400. I mean, they're just ridiculous, the price on those things. So the new 4K resolution monitors will be coming out eventually in the future, so I'm hoping that will bring the price down on the monitors. And then if I can get a bigger, higher resolution monitor, that would benefit the solution more with running three video cards and three-way SLI. I do notice it does help with some games, because I'm not playing at 1080p. I'm playing actually on 1200p, which is 1920 by 1200 resolution. It does help a little bit at that higher resolution, but it really depends on the game. and depends on the benchmark you're running. Like Metro 2033 and Crysis 3, those are the ones that definitely you can see an improvement. There's another thing I want to talk about is there's a thing called CPU bottleneck, and the best way I can explain it is if your processor is slow, like very slow, like a certain speed, and you're running 3 video cards in this kind of configuration, you'll notice where you'll get actually like less frames per second even if you add another card. Trying to think of the best way I can explain this. If you let's say I just had two-way SLI and I had my CPU where it was really bottlenecked, and I decided I want to overclock my CPU, then you would notice a huge frames per second increase depending on how high you overclocked it. Well, that gets even worse when you're running 3 video cards in Nvidia 3-way SLI or tri-SLI. So the best way I can explain it is even with my Core i7 Intel Core i7 2600K at 4.8 gigahertz, I'm still noticing a small CPU bottleneck, and the way I can notice that is with 2 cards. If I open MSI Afterburner, it will show GPU usage, and a good way for me to tell if I have no CPU bottleneck at all is depending on the game, it will say 99 to 98% GPU usage on both cards. You know, on both cards it's going to show that, and that's how you know you don't have any CPU bottleneck on there. You know, especially at this speed, I shouldn't have any bottleneck, but once you add the third card in, you still get a sort of a bottleneck. And the best way I can explain this is like I was running Crysis 3. If I run 2 cards, 2 EVGA 670GTX for the wins, the GPU usage is always 99%. But if I run the third card, I'm only getting like 94 to 95%. So I'm running into a teeny bit of a small CPU bottleneck. And to be honest, the only way I can remove that because of my CPU is if I upgraded to a socket 2011 X79 system, and I went with Core i7 3930K and probably overclocked that to 5 gigahertz. You know, then I would probably not see, I'd always see 99% GPU usage. But then let's say I added in a fourth video card, a fourth 670 GTX, then I would still get some kind of CPU bottleneck probably. So it's kind of tricky. It's not that bad. It dropped a little bit, like I said, 94% GPU usage. Some games will, Metro, some will go to 95 to 98%. Metro 2033 is still one of the really demanding games. Crysis 3, it's demanding, but I don't see, you still need more, better drivers for it. The Nvidia drivers, especially with the 3 cards, 3-way SLI, you need better Nvidia drivers to get more of a performance increase. I was really impressed with Metro 2033 in-game. If I was running 2 EVGA 670 GTX for the wins, I was only getting like 62 frames per second average, or 60 frames per second average. But if I go to that same exact spot with the highest settings, I'm getting probably like 99 to 100% or 100 frames per second, which is literally insane. So you can see there was, adding the third card in didn't give that much of a performance increase. It's only like 30 to 40 frames per second. That's another thing you got to keep in mind. It depends on the game and if it supports 3-way SLI. Some games you'll notice a small performance increase. Adding the third video card technically would only give me like 40 to 50 frames per second more, but it really depends on the game. Believe it or not, Dirt 2, I seen huge increase. I think I was seeing like, not in the benchmark, but in the main title screen, when I added the third card in, I think it was going up to like 400 frames per second average. So I did notice like a 75% or 75 extra frames per second in that main menu. Just testing that out. So it really depends on the game, really depends on the benchmark. The really nice thing about the 3-way SLI EVGA 670 GTX, I'll just call them GTX for the wins since they're all overclocked at the same speed. So whenever you see me talking about EVGA 670 GTX for the win and 3-way SLI, even though one of the cards is not the same, they're all overclocked at the same speed, so they're technically all the same cards, and I get the same scores as if I bought a 670 for the win model. But yeah, the performance, The best way I can explain it is like if you had a huge explosion and you had two 670 GTX for the wins. Let's say I was playing Battlefield 3 and it dropped to 40 or 60 frames per second with a huge explosion. You won't notice, you might notice a little bit of lag there once it drops to 40 frames per second, but with the third card, you won't notice any lag at all. Doesn't matter what's going on the screen, explosions, big, bombs going off, this and that on the screen, you won't notice any frames per second dip at all. There's a thing called micro stuttering where sometimes you get lag, depending on, if your CPU is clocked high enough or the drivers. Let's say you get a bad driver, you get micro stutter. And what the micro stutter is like if, let's say I had 100 frames per second, it could be laggy with the third card if I added it in. But the good thing is I didn't notice any micro stutter at all adding the third card in. And that's simply amazing because when I had my two AMD, or no, those two HD 4870X2 ATI graphics cards that used Crossfire X with 4 GPUs and quad, it's Quadfire, Crossfire X is 4 GPUs. I noticed micro stutter and lag on some of the games. And when you run 4 GPUs, I didn't find that many games that supported it. I think at the time, maybe Crysis 1 supported it, and maybe Race Driver Grid was the only game that really supported the 4 GPUs. But yeah, three's the sweet spot. If you can get 3 graphics cards, definitely you will notice some kind of performance increase. But like I said, it really depends on the game. Not all games are going to support it. The only reason why I want to get the third card is I really just want to test it out. I want to see, some people were saying you get no performance increase at all, and it's the third card's not worth it. But really, I think they're kind of lying because I've been doing all the benchmarks, and I am noticing a little bit of performance increase, but it really doesn't justify the cost because the cost was a $320 card, and you're only getting like 40, 50 frames per second average, depending on the game. Battlefield 3, I was kind of disappointed in that. I figured I was going to get way more frames per second because I was hoping that if I got more frames per second average while I was recording my gameplay footage, I hope it would help out a lot better. But yeah, that game only really supports 2 graphics cards because the third card was only giving me 10, 15 frames per second, maybe more. I don't know. I went from, let's see, what did I go? I went from like 100 to 111 frames per second with 2 EVGA 670 GTX for the wins. But when I added the third card in there, I think I went like from 110 to 138. So a little bit of an increase, but I mean it wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting always at least 50 frames per second average, especially on Battlefield 3. The limiting factor with a setup like this, with the 3 EVGA 670 GTX for the win graphics cards and 3-way SLI, is the VRAM usage. I only have 2 gigabytes of VRAM, and that's going to come into play if I decide to upgrade to huge resolution monitors, past 2560 by 1600, like 3 1920 by 1080 monitor, or 1920 by 1080 resolution 1080p monitors. When you have Nvidia surround with the 3 monitors, 3 displays, then you'll notice it will use way more VRAM, more than 2 gigabytes of VRAM. So that's one thing. That's one nice thing about the AMD HD 7950 and HD 7970 is they have that 3 gigabytes of VRAM. So with a setup like this, my recommendation, because you have different setups right now. If you really want Nvidia, you could buy expensive Nvidia Titan, which is $1,000. Maybe $1,000, $1,100. Then you could buy a Nvidia 690 GTX, which is $1,000, $1,100, same price as the Titan. Or you could do 3 670 GTX, and that's about the same price range as the 690. But the performance of the 3 cards, depending on the game, if it supports it, is way faster. It literally smokes those setups. But it's more costly. It's really, really costly, so that's something you got to keep in mind. The Titan's really nice. The Titan comes into play when you have huge resolution monitors, the new Nvidia Titan. When you have these past 2560 by 1600 because it has 6 gigabytes of VRAM. So I don't know if you guys heard about that. Yeah, it's really, really fast graphics card. This setup will just literally, with the three 670s, will just smoke pretty much anything out there. It's beating, from some of the tests I run, it's beating the three 680 GTX. Now, if you had two overclocked GTX Titans, which would be literally like $2,000, then you would beat my setup. You gotta keep in mind, one Titan has about the same performance as two 660 GTX Ti, the Ti model, as two of those graphics cards in SLI. So if you had two Titans, it's literally like four 660 Ti's. So I mean, it's insane. You got to look at price to performance when you're kind of comparing these solutions with the different graphics cards. Me, I'm kind of crazy. You guys probably think I'm crazy, but yeah, I just want to test the three-way SLI. We're going to talk about my motherboard. I'm running the Asus Maximus 4 Extreme Z68 motherboard. And the nice thing about this motherboard is it's got a chip that's on it. It's called an NF200 chip. And it gives me more PCI Express bandwidth. You know, it's the motherboard's made to run three-way SLI or three-way Crossfire. It's made to run this kind of configuration, even though I only have a 2600K. So the speeds, I'm just going to open up GPU-Z and kind of tell you the speeds on here for the PCI Express bandwidth speeds for the lanes. Okay, so the top card, if you look at the top 670 for the win, because that's how I have it set up. I have a 670 for the win, which is my original graphics card that I bought. That runs at PCI Express. Looking at the speed, sorry about that. That runs at PCI Express 8x 2.0. So it's 2.0 PCI Express 8x speed. The second card, which is another 670 for the win. This would be the second card that I bought when I was running them in two-way SLI. This was the one I got for $400. This runs at X16 2.0 speed. So this is a full X16 slot. This would be like, if you want to run PCI Express 3.0, this would be like PCI Express 3.0 8X. But yeah, PCI Express 2.0 16X for the second card. And then the third card, this would be the stock reference small PCB, the small 670, the EVGA 670. This is PCI Express 2.0 X16. So it runs X16, X6, or runs X8, X16, X16 in that configuration. And it's not bad. If you get anything if you get anything lower than PCI Express 2.0 8x speed, you will notice some kind of bottleneck and you'll get less performance with the graphics cards. But with that NF200, it gives me that extra speed where those two cards run in PCI Express 2.0 X16, X16. So it does give me some kind of increase. If I bought a X79 motherboard and it was running PCI Express 3.0, then I might notice a increase in performance because each card would have a little bit more bandwidth. Each card might have, you know, PCI Express 3.0 X16X. So it might give me more performance per card. Not that much, I would say probably 1 to 3%. So yeah, it's definitely if you love benchmarking, it's definitely a value. It's an option. I don't recommend it for everybody. It's just something I really, really wanted to test out, and I didn't want to upgrade my cards, you know, because I didn't want to wait for Titan. Titan just came out, and I already had the 670, so my other option was either get rid of the 670s or get a third 670, and the third 670 was just on sale, so to me it looked like an option to do, and I just wanted to test it out. At the end, I decided to run a CPU benchmark just for the heck of it. If you guys were running, I decided to run Cinebench 11.5 benchmark, and I also decided to run benchmarks that would support more of three-way SLI. Some of the old benchmarks that I ran in my 670 for the win SLI video, they weren't supporting past 3 graphics cards, so I decided to say screw those benches, like Crisis Warhead, which is becoming an older game now. It really only supports the two-way SLI, and it's more like CPU bottleneck, or it's more of a CPU benchmark than it is a video game one. I ran Unigine Heaven 4.0 benchmark. It's more demanding, has more settings in it. Definitely the game that surprised me the most, that I really noticed the most performance increase, was, believe it or not, it's an older game, but it actually supports the 3-way SLI, is Stalker Call of Pipriat benchmark. You can see, like, I went up to 500 frames per second average with the 3 cards. I'm looking at the benchmarks right now. The Rain benchmark went up to 656 frames per second average. So you're noticing a huge performance increase with the third card, but it really depends on the game and the benchmark you're running. Oh, that's another thing. This solution's only for higher resolution. It's made for a higher resolution setup. So if you have, to be honest with you, if you have anything under 1080p, 1920 by 1080p, or 1920 by 1080 resolution, 1080p resolution, don't even bother using a setup like this, because you won't notice pretty much any performance increase. Even me, I'm cutting it close because I'm playing 1920 by 1200 resolution, so I'm playing it kind of close right now. But if I was going to upgrade my monitor, it would be definitely 2560 by 1440 resolution if I could afford something like that. So yeah, I will show my overclocked, the settings that I ran for it. I did overclock the bottom card a little bit to match the top cards. I also did a Alien vs Predator benchmark, and I did notice a little bit of performance increase on that. I couldn't figure out how to set the graphic settings up a little bit higher, so I just ran the benchmark and took a screenshot of the frames per second report that it sends. It sends like a notepad report. It tells you your average frames per second and your mid frames per second. I did a couple PLA benchmarks and Unigine Valley, which is another brand new benchmark, and a couple different games. I did want to do Lost Planet 2 and some of the other games, so you would actually notice some kind of improvement. I got to keep saying this. Don't get your hopes up in a solution like this. Don't expect to have, like, it really depends on the benchmark. It really depends on the game, what kind of frames per second you're going to get. If Nvidia has better drivers in the future, that makes it where almost every single game supports at least 3 GPUs, 3-way SLI, then definitely this is a viable solution if Nvidia has better drivers to set it up like that. But it really depends on the game. Some of the new games I'm waiting for Race Driver Grid 2, which is, I'm hoping it's going to be really demanding. I think they said it was going to use the Frostbite 2 engine, which is the same engine as Battlefield 3, or it might be the Ego engine. I don't know. They said it's going to be a little bit more demanding on the graphics. Oh, and another new benchmark that I want to try that just came out, which is another game I'm kind of anticipating on playing, even though it's a little bit older now because it's been on consoles, is Resident Evil 6, which is another benchmark, and I ran that in here. I also decided re-download Batman Arkham City Game of the Year Edition, and I decided to run that as a benchmark for you guys. Highest settings you can think of, Physics X technology on there, highest settings. I'm not sure if this game supports 3-way SLI or not. Some of the benchmarks didn't. Final Fantasy, I think it's 13 benchmark, 13 online or 14 online. Open it in a window. So that's another thing. If you have a game that opens up in a window screen, where it's not full screen but it opens up in a window, sometimes Nvidia SLI won't work on that. So yeah, the new 3D Mark benchmark that just came out is extremely demanding. I mean, it literally, I'm going to have to wait for better Nvidia drivers, but it's literally, if you put it on extreme setting, it kills the 3 EVGA 670GTX for the wins. I mean, there's nothing. The only thing that I could think that would make it smooth is if you had 3 or 4 Titans in 4-way SLI or 3-way SLI. If you had 4 of those, that's the only thing I could think that would make it play smooth, where you're getting maybe 40 to 60 frames per second average. Because with the 3 cards on the highest setting, some of the spots I was seeing, it was dropping down to 10 to 14 frames per second average on the Firestorm benchmark. So definitely, if you want to test a benchmark, a DirectX 11 benchmark that's going to kill your computer, download the brand new 13 or 3D Mark. It's just called 3D Mark. It's not Vantage. It's not 3D Mark 11. It's just called 3D Mark. And the Firestorm benchmark is really, really demanding. So that'd be the one that I would test. I'm just looking at, yeah, I just tried to find more games. There wasn't a lot of benchmarks that I could think of that would support the 3 cards. I did some old classic ones so you guys can compare some of my videos. I wanted an option so you can compare my 2 EVGA 670 GTX for the wins to the brand new 3 EVGA 670 GTX for the wins and try SLI or 3-way SLI. So I decided to run Street Fighter 4, and I decided to run Resident Evil 5, and I did that the variable benchmark and the fixed benchmark. And I also did the PLA benchmark, which is like a Korean benchmark. It's almost like Mafia 2. And speaking of Mafia 2, this time I actually did Mafia 2 benchmark. And Hitman Absolution, that was another one that I really wanted to do with the highest settings. Yeah, Hitman Absolution is really, really, really demanding. When you put on the highest texture, highest settings, with the 2 cards, it was dropping, I'd say probably 50 to 60 frames per second average with the 2 EVGA 670s and SLI. But when you run 3 cards, it's way up there. It's a lot smoother. It doesn't drop below 60 frames per second when you're playing, in game. It's really good for if you have lots of stuff going on. If you have lots of explosions, if you have lots of textures, lots of high resolution setup. If you're playing, I don't know, some people say like the 2560 by 1600 monitors, they're saying you can play, the game smooth, but I'm worried that you're going to run out of VRAM on that, because you only have 2 gigabytes of VRAM on these cards, so I'm worried at that resolution you're going to run out of VRAM. And what happens when you run out of VRAM is your frames per second, you could have 3 of the fastest cards in the world, and you run out of VRAM and your frames per second will just drop like a wall, like a stone. It just, like, you could have like 150 frames per second average, and then you hit that VRAM usage where it uses over the VRAM you have on the graphics card, and it will just drop like 30, 40 frames per second, maybe less, and it won't play any smooth. So I did have that problem happen on some of my older graphics cards. Another thing I like about the 3-way SLI is I don't know if there was a problem with one of my graphics cards, like maybe one was defective, I'm not sure, but I used to get, maybe it was a problem with Battlefield 3, I don't know. Battlefield 3 and Dirt 2, I would get these weird black texture shadows that would flicker. It's not like artifacting, but it's like texture flickering. And with the 3 cards, I don't get that at all. I did try to update I looked around I found out that I have the latest BIOS on the new EVGA 670, the reference card that I bought. So I was going to try to update the BIOS on the graphics card, maybe get more performance or more stability, but it was the same. Another thing I did was I tried to actually underclock. Instead of overclocking a card to make it faster, I tried to underclock it to make all the cards the same speed as the stock reference, and only run it at 915 megahertz core clock, all 3 cards. Because I figured maybe I would get lower temperatures doing that. But the temperature was actually the same. So it really doesn't matter how, on these cards, I noticed it doesn't matter how high you overclock it. That's not what gets the heat. That's not what gets the cards hot. What gets the cards hot is when you start adding voltage to it, when you start adding more. There's a thing called power limit percentage. If you start adding more power limit to make the overclock more stable, and you start adding more voltage, that's when you start getting more heat. And I know I said this earlier in the video, but I was talking about how I wanted to. I was thinking of an option, maybe water cooling my 2 EVGA 670 GTX for the wins, and maybe overclocking them higher to get more performance. That could have been an option, but the 3 cards themselves get more performance than me having the 2 cards and overclocking them in the games that support through SLI. But if I had to do it all over again, if I had to buy, and the prices were cheaper, I would probably buy 2 factory overclocked water cooled, maybe like the EVGA classified, maybe something a little bit cheaper. 2 4GB 680s and SLI, that would probably be the best solution. Or maybe 2 HD 7970s in Crossfire. But I don't like AMD ATI drivers. I had so many problems with them. So that's kind of why I want to go with Nvidia on this build. I wanted a more stable platform. When I had ATI and AMD graphics cards, a lot of my games would crash. Or believe it or not, I get actually higher temperatures than I'm getting now. I know you think 90C is hot, so 90 Celsius. But I mean, when I had my HD40 X2 graphics card, say we get up to 100 Celsius or more on the stock fan. And that was pretty much normal for those cards. They were extremely hot. So yeah, the temperatures, they are hot. I would only want my graphics card to run 80 to 85 Celsius max. But since I took that back plate, they go up to 86 or 87 Celsius. I mean, I can deal with that. Another thing I want to mention is noise. Because the top card runs so hot and you're running the automatic fan speed, the noise gets a lot louder with the 3 cards, and it will actually heat up your whole room. You know, you'll notice like your whole room will literally heat up. So it's something you gotta keep in mind. Your room is gonna get a lot hotter with the 3 cards. And you need some kind of cooling to blow on the cards. Like I have another 120mm fan blowing on the front that I mounted on the hard drive cage, just so I can get some extra ventilation blowing into the cards because they're kind of like blocked. There's nothing I can do because most motherboards have the 2 slot spacing. So when you run 3 cards on top of each other that are air cooled with the factory reference design blower style coolers, they're gonna overheat. There's not really anything you can do with it. I guess air conditioning unit blowing inside your computer would be the only thing I could think that would lower those temperatures down, but I just have all the rooms. I'm in a smaller room with 3 or 4 computers in the room right now, so of course my temperature is going to go up a lot compared to a bigger room that has air conditioning in it. So yeah, I just want to tell you guys the pros and cons of a setup like this. Like I said, the noise, it does get a little bit noisy. Temperature, I did crank up the fan speed up to like 70 when the cards were hitting 90 Celsius. I tried cranking them up to 70% fan speed on all cards, and I didn't notice any temperature drop, maybe 1 to 2 Celsius. So that tells me that the cards are starving for air. They're blocked, they're starving for air. Even though the cards are designed for this, where they have an air vent in the front where it can suck up air, they're just extremely, there's no air. And this is kind of what I was talking about when I was showing 2 EVGA 670GTX for the ones in SLI. Even though there was a gap, now I have a card that is in the middle of that gap. So there's like a 1/4 of an inch of air that it has to suck up through the fan, or maybe less than that. I know, a couple millimeters. There's nothing you can really do in a setup like this. I would recommend, I wouldn't even recommend it because it's just too costly, but if you had a setup like this, you have 3 680s, 3 670s, 3 HD 7970s, you're probably going to have to water cool them if you want comfortable temps, if you want better temps. If you want to overclock, you're definitely going to have to water cool them. A solution that I probably could do is maybe get aftermarket coolers, but the coolers I've seen for these cards are 3 slot coolers and they won't fit. So water cooling is really my only option when you have a setup like this. Yeah, so I'll kind of tell you the pros and cons. You're going to get noisy temps. These are the cons. You're going to get hot cards that are going to run hot, 87 to 90 Celsius usually, and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, unless you water cool them, there's really nothing you can do. But And some of the games, a lot of the games aren't going to support three-way SLI, so it's depending on the games, depending on the titles. If you love benchmarking, this would be kind of the pros. If you love benchmarking, you would love a setup like this. You would love to try to get records that you can get with this. It's, to be honest, it's all bragging rights. I mean, it's just literally all bragging rights. You say, oh hey, look at me, I got three-way SLI. Oh man, I'm so cool. Look at me, I'm a rock star. I mean, it's pretty much bragging rights. So for me, I just wanted to benchmark it and test it out, see how it performed. I'm happy with the performance. I wish it was a little bit more frames per second, but it really depends on the title of the game. The games that benefit from it, like I said, Crysis 3, Metro 2033, Far Cry 3, pretty much any game with the title 3 in it, with the number 3. No, I'm joking. Just, yeah, anything, Crysis 3, Metro 2033, Far Cry 3, Hitman Absolution was definitely a best. I noticed the performance increase with the third card. Call of Stalker, Call of Pripyat was one that was really, really good to benchmark. 3D, I'm not that impressed with the 3D Mark 11 to show an increase on it, so that might be one I would test. The new 3D Mark program, I don't know if the third card's that working that well. Maybe it's the drivers, but because the program just came out, but the new 3D Mark, I expected a higher score. I think it was only getting like, I'm trying to think, it was 1,200 points on extreme setting. I know the program's demanding, but I was figuring maybe I was going to get 2,000, 3,000, maybe higher than that. Because if I run 3D Mark 11, I was getting over 6,000 extreme score, which is literally insane. You can see the third card's actually working on 3D Mark 11. You can see the performance increase. 3D Mark Advantage wasn't that much of a performance increase. A little bit. It was, let's see, what did I go? I think I went from 30, I'll have to look at my scores. It might be 36,000, maybe higher than that. No, it's 54,000. No, 52,000 with two cards and performance score, the GPU score. And then when I ran three cards, it was like 59,000, 60,000. So it really depends on the program. I'm running into a CPU bottleneck, a small one, even with the 2600K of 4.8 gigahertz. And there's not really that much I can do. I can probably overclock it to 5.0 gigahertz and get it stable, but I might end up killing my CPU because I don't know how much. It needs too much voltage to be stable at 5.0 gigahertz. So yeah, you can. I'm impressed with the stock reference 680. That would be the way to go. I would buy the small PCB stock 670 EVGA reference card and just overclock it to EVGA 670 for the wind speeds, which is technically like a stock reference 680 clocks, the 1006 megahertz, because you're going to save so much money by doing that. Instead of buying three 670 for the winds, you're going to save a huge amount of money. So a stock EVGA 670 GTX for the win, which I forgot to mention, that was an OEM card. It wasn't a retail package. It came in a cardboard box from EVGA. So with all the package accessories, so it was OEM box. It just came with the card itself and the driver disc. Nothing fancy. Yeah, definitely. If you could get three of those, it would still be cheaper than a Nvidia Titan, and it would still be cheaper than the Nvidia 690 GTX, and probably the Asus Aries 2 with the two HD 7970s, which are water cooled. When you have three EVGA 670 GTX for the wins, and you're comparing this price point, you have to compare it to those cards because you're getting up in that $1,000 to $1,200 range on the graphics cards. So if you added, I know it's crazy the price that I paid for these cards. If you think about it, my top EVGA 670 GTX for the win was $430. Then you add a $20 EVGA 680 backplate. Then I bought the same card again for $400. Then you add another $20 680 backplate. So let's just say that's like $900 right there, you know, $880, $900. Then you add on this card right here, which was 320. Let's just say 880. So that's that's like $1,200 right there just for the 3 cards. So it's about the same price, but if the game supports it, the performance is just going to smoke all the solutions. And this gets me hyped up to maybe in the future to buy to buy a better case, maybe another motherboard, a CPU, but now I can keep the graphics cards and switch them over to another project if I want. So that's an option I was thinking about. But yeah, in the long run, I know it sounds expensive right now, but in the long run, I think I saved a lot of money because if I would have bought 3 Titans or 2 Titan, let's just say 2 Titans, Nvidia Titans, that's $2,000 right there. Or let's say I would have buy 2 690 GTX, which is before GPUs, that's $2,000 or more right there. So I mean, the 3 cards solution, it's an option. You can do it if you want. Not all games are going to support it. If you understand that and you know that not all the games are going to support 3 GPUs, a lot of them will. Nvidia's getting a little bit better with the drivers. Compared to AMD, their drivers are way better. I remember when I had AMD, I'd be waiting like literally 2 months to get a new Crossfire driver to have both of my 5870s to work. And by the time I waited 2 to 3 months, the game was too old for me to play it, or I already beat it because I didn't want to wait. So yeah, I always try to play games when they first came out. So I don't want to wait for these stupid drivers. If they don't come out, then it's a fail, and you know, it's a fail on that company. So Nvidia's not too bad. They're getting pretty good. They release drivers, you know, maybe 1 to 2 months, but then AMD maybe probably once a month. You know, it's not too bad. So yeah, the drivers are extremely stable. I didn't notice any crashing. The only thing I really noticed was the temperature increase for the 3 cards. I did have to rip out the power supply, the Corsair HX1000, to power these beasts with the 3 cards. And yeah, that's an option. So if I want to upgrade the motherboard and the CPU, I can still keep the power supply. I was planning on buying a Lian Tech Bench case. That was my option that I was thinking about doing. And just doing a PC rebuild with all the parts I got right now. And maybe doing a Corsair H100i and doing that as a test bench computer. But I decided to just say screw it. I seen that sale price on the EVGA 670 reference card, and I had to jump on it now before the price went up, because right now I only paid $320 for that same card, but I'm going to look online right now and see how much they're going for. I buy all my parts from Tiger Direct, so tigerdirect.com. So that's where I ended up buying the EVGA 670 reference card. Right now 680s are going up in price. Yeah, I noticed the 670 is an option. If you can overclock the 670 to beat a stock reference 680, but the vice versa is if you want to overclock a 680, sometimes the 680s will overclock a little bit higher, and you get more of a performance increase. But if you're on a budget, the 670 is definitely the way to go. Okay, so my card was $320, but if you look at these other 670s, they're going for the same card, which is in a retail box right now, is going for $372. So I did save about, was it $50, something like that. I did save some money buying the OEM box copy, and it was on sale. So yeah, I wanted the same model of 670 for the Win model, but it was too expensive. It was $400. And the reason why that card's so expensive is because it uses long PCB. It uses a 680 cooler. So inside it's a custom cooler, and it's custom all the parts, and it's better. It's a little bit better for overclocking. But if you only want 670 for the Win speeds, which is 1000 to 6 megahertz, then definitely this is an option. You can get just a stock small PCB 670 cards, and some of them will overclock to that same speed. I mean, mine was so easy. I didn't have to adjust any voltage. It just, bumped up the core clock and bumped up the memory clock to the same speed, and everything worked right out of the box. So I was very, very impressed with that. The plus side, even though the small PCBs don't overclock that high, the small 670 PCBs, the board, the plus side of that is if you want to put it in a smaller computer like an ITX Bitphoenix Prodigy case or something really, really small, those cards are super, super small. They're smaller than this. This card is like, I think 10 inches with the huge cooler and everything on it. The 670 for the win is 10.5 inches, I think. So that card's a little bit bigger than this card, but everything lines up. The weird thing is the two 6-pin power connectors are actually on the middle of the card because it uses a small PCB on the small PCB 670, but on the EVGA 670 for the Win model, they're towards the end because it uses 680 PCB, so the power connector's at the end. This one's in the middle, so that's kind of a negative thing because it sucks with cable routing and cable management. It makes it really hard for me to manage the cables and zip tie them, and literally like all that cable management work I did was like pretty much gone because I had to switch both power supplies out. So that's kind of why I'm not making a video showing the setup. I will show a picture of what the card looks like in here. So I mean, you guys probably seen it before. Just picture my same setup with the small PCB card on the bottom. I mean, it's all the same. I mean, I don't have a camera to make videos on it, so I can take pictures. It's pretty much all the same setup. All I did was put a Corsair HX 1001 and put the 3 cards and just stacked them all together and put the power cords on them, and that was it. I do have the power connectors, the 6-pin cables wrapped around and zip tied in the case because they're just everywhere. It's out of control. So you won't get good cable management when you have a setup like this because the power connectors are at different ends of the card, which literally is freaking insane. But yeah. So if there's any benchmarks you guys want me to run, please tell me in the comments section. I will try to run any benchmarks you want me. Just tell me. Catzilla benchmark. That's the problem I had. That stupid benchmark. They want me to like go to Facebook and sign up for an account just to put in a code so it unlocks it so I could run the Catzilla or Tiger benchmark setting on that. So I won't be running Catzilla benchmark, but I will try to run whatever you guys else want, and I hope this kind of informs you guys on the pros and cons of this kind of setup. I'm very, very happy, but like I said, you got to keep in mind what the setup's for. The setup is only for people who are running huge high-resolution monitors, because literally if you're running 2560 by 1600 resolution monitor, you're running a 3-display monitor, you have no options. You're screwed. You can't power. I mean, you're not going to get playable frames per second with one 680. Even with two 680s, I mean, it's debatable. I like my games to be always 60 frames per second. If it drops below 60 frames per second, I'm not happy. So that's where the third card comes into play. Is I think with a 2560 by 1600, probably not the highest settings in game, but you will always have that 60 frames per second average with this setup from the testing I've done. Even at 1920 by 1200, I've noticed it's way above. It's like, 100 frames per second average, probably more. So that tells me that you're always going to get, 60 frames per second average. And, it's fun to play with this. I'll do more benchmark and more tests. I just wanted to try it out. I had the motherboard. I had the expensive motherboard that's made for 3-way SLI. And if you're buying a motherboard this expensive, I think it was like $360 for this motherboard. And you got a 1000-watt power supply like I already had. It's an option. You just want to try it out. CPU bottlenecks can happen, so you got to overclock that CPU like crazy if you're running the stock CPU speed. I'll be honest with you, if you're running anything then below 4.6 gigahertz on the CPU, if you got a 37 Core i7 3770K or a 2600K or below, and you're running anything below 4.6 gigahertz, I don't recommend this setup because you're going to have a huge bottleneck. I don't know. I'm noticing it. You're going to have a huge bottleneck. There's nothing where you're not going to get the performance that you can out of the third card, as if you overclock that CPU more. 4.8 gigahertz is perfect for this setup. You know, my 2600K at 4.8 gigahertz. It's like it's perfect for, you get the full performance almost of the third card, because I'm getting like 95% GPU usage, 94, 95. If I had a 6-core CPU with higher overclock, maybe 5 gigahertz, or I might be able to do it with a 3770K at 5.0 gigahertz, maybe, you know, because that CPU is a little bit faster than my 2600K. Yeah, then you might notice a performance increase if you do a setup like that. So I hope you guys liked the benchmark. I hope it kind of informed you. Took me like a full day and a half to kind of get this benchmark running for you guys. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to send me a PM message or comment in the comments what benchmarks you want me to run. I kind of want to help you guys out because I know a lot of you guys don't have money, like $1,200 to buy freaking 3670 GTX. So I just want to, I'm not the first person to do this, but some of these websites, I don't trust their results. So I want to run my own benchmark results, which are in-game, which I take screenshots using for apps in-game. I show the real frames per second. I show the highest graphics settings you can have for these games. I'm pretty much up there with 1920 by 1200. So if you had a 1920 by 1080 resolution monitor, 1080p, you get higher frames per second than I would, way higher. But I don't recommend this setup for anybody under 1080p resolution monitor. I probably don't even recommend it at my resolution, 1920 by 1200. I mean, this is like the minimum resolution monitor size for a setup like this, because then you're starting to lose money of having the third card. You're starting to, it doesn't justify the cost at the end of the day if you're not getting a certain frames per second. This is only for high resolution setup, so that's something you got to think about. You really got to think about, is the third card worth it? And what am I going to be doing with the third graphics card? Am I going to be benchmarking? Am I going to be running 3 displays? Because if you got the money to buy 3 displays in Nvidia Surround, then you got the money to buy 3 670 GTX for the wins. You know, you have the money to buy my kind of setup. So yeah, I hope this really helped you guys. I'm here if you need any questions, want me to benchmark. I'm waiting for new games to come out. Like I'm still waiting for the stupid Battlefield 3 Endgame DLC to come out. So I'm sorry for the lack of videos. Definitely the game that I'm going to be making videos on definitely is, I'm waiting for Codemasters Race Driver Grid 2 racing game. So I'm really hardcore racing game fan, and I'm really hardcore first-person shooter fan. So I really, those are going to be the games I'm going to be doing non-stop videos of. I'm making gameplay videos of that, and I hope you like the content that I'm providing so far. I'm going to have better videos in the future, but right now we're having like a dry spell of some of these games that are coming out. There's like a lack of video games, and it really, really sucks, but hopefully in the future they'll have more games. And I really, really hope with this solution that I got right here with the 3-way SLI, I'm hoping Nvidia gets their stuff in gear. You know, somebody kicks them in the rear end and gets their stuff in gear for these drivers. We need 3-way SLI drivers. We need 3-way SLI support. You go back in the day to when the people had the 8800 Ultras, which was like an $800 graphics card a piece. So could you imagine those? 3 of those, that's $2,400 for 3 8800 Ultras, you know, because they're like $800. Oh, let's see, was that? Oh, $3,200. Sorry, that's wrong. Yeah, $3,200 for 3 8800 Ultras back in the day. The 8800 Ultras were running perfect in Tri-SLI, 3-way SLI, and a lot of those games back then supported that. So that's what I'm hoping. The new games, they need to support the 3-way SLI, and definitely the drivers got to get better. The drivers are pretty decent right now, but there's a lack of games that support the third card. Trying to think, Dirt Showdown I don't think supports 3-way SLI. I think you get the same frames per second with 3 cards than you do with 2 cards. And it's dependent. Like I said, some games you actually get less frames per second with 3 cards than you would just 2. It's always best, if you can afford it, buy the fastest, most powerful single GPU card you can buy if you can afford it. Now, I don't get this wrong. I love that people have Nvidia Titan. I think it's the most awesome card I ever imagine. New Nvidia Titan with the 6 gigabytes of VRAM. It's just insane. The temperatures run a lot lower. It's made for overclocking. It's an awesome card, but the price doesn't justify the performance. I could get probably two 660 Ti's, overclock those like crazy, and probably maybe smoke the Titan. I know my two stock EVGA 670 GTX for the ones beat the Titan. In the, right when it was coming out, I seen some of the benchmarks, and then I read it and seen some of the benchmarks in here, and it was beating it. So, you have to see. Like I said, in the link in the description, please check the link in the description. I will have an article that will show the Titan and the three 680s, and you can compare if you want my scores versus theirs, or I can benchmark any other game or benchmark you want me to run, and just compare my results with theirs. Mine are real world scenario, mine are what you're going to get. A lot of these benchmarks I did install on the SSDs. I don't know, to make it smoother. I don't know if that's cheating or not, but I did install some of these benchmark programs on SSD. Mafia 2 I re-downloaded. Batman Arkham City Game of the Year Edition, which that was a freaking huge game. That's like 18, 19 gigabyte file. So yeah, it took me like a whole day to get these benchmarks out for you guys. And I really hope you guys enjoy the benchmarks. It takes a long time. If you want, please, I would love it if you click that like button. Because this took me like forever to benchmark all these, and I really want to show you the performance. Sorry I can't show you any videos inside the case because I don't have my digital camera. I was kind of borrowing that. But yeah, it's my same setup with a card smacked in the bottom of the slot. The small reference cards on the bottom of the motherboard right in front of the power supply, so there's not a lot of room in there. I mean, it's the same setup. My case only supports three-way SLI, so I can only same with the motherboard, it only supports 3 cards. So I can only put the 3 cards, but they're stacked up on top of each other with no air to breathe. If you had a bigger motherboard, you might be able to put spacing in between the cards to get a little bit more airflow. Excuse me, but even that's tricky. Sometimes you won't get airflow on there. So yeah, it was a fun little project. I just wanted to test it out. I'm happy. I'm really satisfied with the performance, and I have that mindset of I knew what to expect out of the outcome. I knew what I was getting when I went into this 3-way SLI setup. Some people are saying, "Oh man, they're probably saying, "Oh man, why Goku? You're so stupid to get a third card." But I really wanted to test it out. I really want to benchmark. I love benchmarking these new games, and this will give me a benchmark of new graphics cards to come out in the future. If you got a graphics card that comes out in the future that can beat 3 EVGA 670 GTX for the wins, and it's a single GPU graphics card, I'll be freaking amazed. Like, you're already seeing the new Nvidia Titan is beating 2 660 Ti's. Well, I mean, it's about the same performance. Sometimes the 660 Ti's are a little bit faster. Sometimes the Titan's a little bit faster. It's about the same, but let's just say the Titan's faster, and they're about the same. So let's just say the Titan's faster. Hopefully you can get new graphics cards that are more demanding and it's going to push that envelope, and it's going to be faster, and it's going to beat a solution like this to where you won't need 3-way SLI in the future. You'll have this one graphics card. And I have a feeling like new video games, now that the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 720 are coming out, whatever the new Xbox is, now that those are coming out, they're going to push. You're not going to get these console ports. When I mean console ports, the Xbox 360 and the PS3 are holding back PCs because a lot of the games are based off the Xbox 360 or the PS3, and the graphics have to be turned down or they have to be toned down, so the games don't look as good, and then they'll be console ported and ported over from the console to the PC, and then we get less graphics. Some games are better, like Dirt 2 was for the consoles first, and then they put it over to the PC and added DirectX 11 features, and you can notice a difference. The PC version will smoke the Xbox version, and it'll look way, way better. So yeah, if the new PS4 has the 8-core CPUs, that will support, games will run better on my 2600K in the future because it has hyper-threading, and graphics cards, if they support multiple GPUs in the future, they probably will. We'll get better games. You'll just have to keep waiting. Crysis 3, that would be the game I would benchmark and see how it runs on your computer. The highest settings. I tried doing, in my test I ran 8x MSAA, which uses the most VRAM, which is the most demanding. They do have Nvidia, was it TXAA, which is a new Nvidia thing for the 600 graphics cards, and the Titan. It's a new like Nvidia feature setting, graphics quality setting, so it's a little bit the games look a little bit better. But yeah, you'll have to think about that. You'll have to. The settings are going to be all the way the highest settings in Crysis 3, and you'll get frames per second drop. I remember when I ran two EVGA 670 GTX for the wins. Crysis 3 wasn't that playable for me. I was getting like 40 frames per second average on some of the tests, and now I get like way over 60 frames per second. I'm trying to think because it's been a while since I've run the Crysis 3 benchmark with the three cards, but with the three cards, the 670 GTX for the ones in three-way SLI is way over 60 frames per second average, so it's more playable. I think it might have been like 90 frames. No, it's 60 to 90 frames per second average, something like that. It's more playable. My eyes, because I used to be an old school Counter-Strike player, I can detect when your frames per second drop below 120 to 100 frames per second. I can detect it. Not a lot of people can. If you're one of the old school players who played twitchy first person shooter games and you play it with VSync off, and you got a good monitor, sometimes you can notice it. So it's got to be at least 60 frames per second average for my games now, and this is why I got this set up. I really want to test it out and see how it performed, and it doesn't justify the cost to have the third card. It only justifies it if you have expensive hardware to begin with. If you got freaking like X79 system, a $5,000 computer, you got three-way Nvidia surround with 3 monitors, and you got three 680 GTX, then it justifies the cost of having a setup like that. But my only thing that's holding me back right now with this setup is my monitor, because it's only 1920 by 1200. But I do notice a performance increase with the third card with this resolution, but I would notice a higher increase if I had a higher resolution monitor, and that would justify the cost if I had the higher resolution monitor. But these monitors are just ridiculous. The price of they're way up there. They're like $1,100 for some of these 2560 by 1440 or 25. You can't even find 2560 by 1600 monitors hardly. And if you do, they're too much, like $1,500 on some of them. I'm not gonna pay I'd rather pay $1,500 in video cards than I would putting in a $1,500 monitor. And to me, I hate 3 monitors and 3-way Nvidia surround with 3 monitors where you can see where it's stretched out. I don't like it because you can see the bezel, the screen, or, the edges around the screen. I don't like that setup, but maybe that's just me. Some gamers don't like it. I prefer a giant high resolution display, one single monitor with high resolution, because you can see more pixels. You can see more in-game pixels. Your character, the best way I can describe it, your character looks smaller, but the world around the character, let's say you're playing a first-person shooter game and you see a gun, the gun might be smaller, but the character around it, the world will look a lot bigger with the higher resolution. It's way better. That's why I love my 1920 by 1200 resolution monitor, because I switched it back to 1920 by 1080, because you could change the resolutions monitor in the game, the resolution, and it's totally different. You can notice it. I take a performance hit, but it's worth it. You can notice about it's about 1 to 2 inches around the edges of the monitor, like a frame. Let's say if you're doing 1 inch or 2 inches frame around the whole display, that's how much of the game you're missing when you go to that lower 1080p resolution. So yeah, sorry for dragging on and on. I kind of wanted to do this in a 2-part video. Maybe it might do it in a 3-part video, I don't know. So I hope I helped you guys out. Like I said, you got any questions, please tell me. I hope these benchmarks kind of helped you out, and have a nice day. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to my channel. It's literally, I'm so freaking happy. Looks like every day I produce more videos. I see like more subscribers. Sorry I can't do any like giveaway or anything, because I'm broke. I can't do any like, subscriber giveaway. Some of you guys do that, but I really appreciate you guys watching my video and clicking the like button. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be subscribed. I try to say that all the time because I feel bad. I don't make videos all the time for you guys. But when I try to make a video, I hope it's something you guys enjoy. I really love making the Battlefield 3 videos. It kind of, that's my thing. And I hope you guys like the content so far. And yeah, hopefully this gives you some kind of insight on three-way 670 GTX, three-way SLI, tri-SLI. Some people call it three-way SLI. Some people call it tri-SLI. Give you some kind of insight and the performance. I would say with the three cards, the price is looking at like $1,200 with the three cards, and then you add up the price of the system. So the whole computer. Say I'm trying to think. I think my whole computer is about $3,200 now. Maybe $3,300. No, I'd say about $3,200. That includes probably the monitor and all the computer equipment. Keyboard, mouse, the tower, the water cooling, the three graphics cards, the motherboard, CPU. Pretty much the whole system is like $3,200, which I know sounds insane. But when you look at all these people who have these high-end machines with three graphics cards, they'll have water cooled, all three of them. The highest 32 gigabytes of RAM, the highest settings. Some of those machines go to like $5,000 to $7,000. I even seen a cool guy's computer when the 680s first came out. He had three of the 680 classifieds. I think they were like 2 or 4 gigabyte models. And he said in the description his computer was like $9,000, which my jaw dropped. That's insane. You could buy a car for that price. So yeah, tell me what you guys think. If any benchmarks you want me to run, I can do that. And you got any questions, you can send me a comment or a YouTube PM message. I'm always here, and I try to read my comments when I can. And hopefully I don't have any problems with YouTube when I'm trying to upload this. So yeah, thank you guys for everything. I really appreciate you guys clicking the like button. If you click the like button on this video, I'd really appreciate it. I spent like all day trying to make these benchmark videos and running benchmarks for you guys. And a lot of these benchmarks I just tried. I knew that some of them supported three-way SLI, so I just tried to do these ones. So you can kind of compare. If you want to run these benchmarks, you can compare versus my three-way SLI if you want. This would be the way to do it. I compare my benchmarks versus three-way SLI. Even though I'm running 1920 by 1200, this will give you a worst case scenario because it's a higher resolution. You'll get more frames per second than I will with 1080p. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy it. Have a nice day.